Welcome everybody to the next in our series of webinars from the One Equine Trust. Aisling will be recording this evening, just so as you know, which means, guys, if you're here this evening, it's super to see you. And also, if you need to access any of this at a later date, you can do so via our YouTube channel. It's just under One Equine Trust on YouTube. This evening we are joined by Cara Collins. It's lovely to have you with us, Cara. Cara's here on a sort of a couple of hats on this evening. So Cara runs UHub. She's a co-founder of UHub and has incorporated her equine assisted practice into her current business model. And she also sits on the Accredited Practitioners Register Advisory Board, which relates to the Accredited Practitioners Register established by Athena Herd in the UK and is independently recognised by the PSA. And we'll go into that in a little bit more detail. There's a lot of initials coming out there and jargon coming out, but we'll go into that in a little bit more detail later on. But as by way of introduction, Cara, I'll probably let you kick off here and just fill us in with a little bit of background about yourself. I know you a little bit through the horses, and I think you were in finance, I think, before this. So maybe if you want to fill us in as to how you ended up where you are just at the moment.
Yeah, sure. I'm just kind of winging this, so I'm gonna kind of run through and then ask questions or stop me whenever. So I started off life as an accountant. I find it deeply fulfilling. But I was fortunate. I went out on my own, self-employed, and I was fortunate to get a few contracts working with charities, and ended up with quite a lot of clients who were in the VCSE sector, I suppose. And I got a contract with Lifeline, the suicide prevention helpline, as their finance manager to cover a maternity leave. And I was there for about a year and a half. And that kind of, I was already interested in mental health, but kind of seeing the work that happened on the front line really took that interest to a different level. And all of a sudden, I could see frontline workers working with people who were suicidal and how they got into that position, what their qualifications were, and how they trained. Um, when I finished that contract, I then went to day class at college and a local college and started my studying to become a counsellor. And I qualified maybe 2012, something like that. And again, continued working in finance because I wasn't making very much money doing what I was doing. And one day, a chance conversation in the office that I worked in, and yeah, I suppose I overheard a conversation of how a service user was spoken to, and I was really cross. And I said, if anybody spoke to my client like that, I'd be furious. And I just ranted it to somebody behind me who happened to be this lady, Pamela Kirkpatrick, who I didn't know. And she just said, oh, we could do it ourselves. So that was about 2016. And we set up our own counselling organisation about 2 months later with no business plan and about 5 grand each. And we're like, stuff it, we'll go for it. So that was May 2016. And fast forward to now, 2024. We have about 100 to 120 staff working for us, and that includes all sorts of multidisciplinary therapeutic staff. So art therapy, play therapy. We use emotional freedom techniques, some holistic therapies, and we have clinical placements come and study with us when they're doing their professional practice to become a qualified counsellor. And we deliver really all over North Down, Ards, and a lot of Belfast. And we have premises in Newton Bangor, and East Belfast. So we kind of turned into a really big beast. And I end up doing a lot of accounting and not so much counselling anymore, which is ironic, really. But it's been a fab journey. I've always been into horses from I was a child and was always interested in equine therapy as an intervention, and did a bit of research and decided to train with Athena. I don't know how many years ago, it must be like 3 years, but time goes so fast. So trained with Athena here and did various qualifications. I really loved it. Actually, I thought it might be really difficult for me to do because as a counsellor, we're really tightly bound by a code of ethics. And I suppose it's in my roots now. It's the scaffolding from where I work, and I can't go by it. So I'm always really concerned when I do other training that it clashes with
Yeah.
how I've taught to be with a client, and it really didn't. It was lovely. So I was really pleased with that. Loved the training, and started to tinker at it at home. Bought some miniature horses that were, you know, good to work with clients, I suppose, as well as other ones I've got. UHub does an awful lot of work with neurodiverse children. That was by accident. We've ended up with a huge proportion of our service users would be children and families and neurodiverse children. And the equine therapy fits really, really well with some of them. So the decision was made. I set up Rivers Herd, so that kind of is a sub-wing of UHub, but that would be the equine therapy work that we do. I suppose one of the issues I always had from the outset was around safety, client safety, how the market might perceive me as an equine practitioner in comparison to another equine practitioner who has different foundation training or no foundation training. And as an employer and somebody that regularly deals with funders and statutory bodies, I could see how important it was to have all that kind of tidied up. So just to give a bit of background, we are funded through the National Lottery Community Fund, Comic Relief, the Executive Office at Stormont, Belfast Health and Social Care Trust, Children and Adolescents Mental Health Services in Belfast and South Eastern Trust area, and the South Eastern Health and Social Care Trust. And then we have lots of other kind of smaller pots of funding from the Department of Health and things like that. And it's my responsibility to complete the funding applications or the tenders. And I am always asked when I'm putting in a bid, whether it's for equine therapy or counselling or whatever it is, how are your staff team qualified? How are they regulated? How do we know they're going to do a good job and they're going to practice ethically and safely before we give you any money to do your job? And that's a really big part of it. So when I started on this journey, there was no accredited practitioner register, and that made me feel a little, I suppose, a little unsafe. And I knew that without that, it would be a really hard sell to funders, because you put so much into your training and into your practice, but getting funding is brilliant when you can get it. I'll go into a wee bit of that, actually, an interesting bit on that. But yeah, there was no accredited register. So I attend supervision twice a month. I do CPD. I have a code of ethics that I'm bound by as a BACP counsellor, who's kind of our governing body. But some people who are working in the equine therapy or equine learning sphere don't have those things. And there's that kind of general worry about, okay, well, it's lonely working with the horses on your own.
Yeah.
Stuff comes up with clients, doesn't it? And you're like, whoa, you've nobody to kind of talk that out with. I even find it hard talking to my supervisor who's got to kind of the gist of the equine work, but I had to nearly inform him of how I use the horses in my practice. But yeah, it can be lonely, and it's not like counselling. You don't just rock up and somebody starts talking. You've got to have a bit of a plan of what you're going to do in that session.
Yeah.
And if somebody keeps coming to 6 or 8 sessions, some days you're scratching your head going, gosh, what am I going to do with them today? How am I going to
Yeah.
keep them engaged? How am I going to make it meaningful? So Athena were championing this accredited register and getting it accredited with PSA. And it sounded like such a huge long shot because there's never been any animal intervention that has had a PSA accredited register. But they did it, and fair play to them. They put an awful lot of work in, and they asked me to come along and sit on the advisory board, which I was happy to do. And I suppose I thought it might be really helpful for people who don't work in a field that has an accrediting body to kind of maybe answer some questions, but explain the importance of being part of an accredited register.
Yeah.
And I can see the kind of both sides of it as well. I appreciate that Athena have driven this, and Athena have, it has cost them a lot of money to get to where they are, which is great. and Athena are also a training organisation. But this accredited practitioner register is separate to the training organisation, and it's open to everybody, regardless of what training organisation you did your core training with, or indeed if you did any training at all, because there is also a route to accreditation for those who have been in practice for a long time and are qualified by experience and perhaps have been doing it much longer than there was training available in the UK. So it is kind of open to everybody. But as an organisation who manages probably around £1 million worth of funding every year, I know how important it is that practitioners are on that register. A lot of you guys might have heard of Happy Healthy Minds, and we were really lucky. You have got an awful lot of work through Happy Healthy Minds a few years ago. It was very lucrative. Happy Healthy Minds funded equine facilitated work, whether it was learning or therapy. But to get an equine practitioner into the school, they had to be a qualified counsellor or therapist and registered with an accredited body like BACP, which meant it ruled out all those practitioners who are fab, who do equine facilitated learning type activities, because the Education Authority couldn't say, rubber stamp them and say, okay, they're really good, they're safe, ethical. There was no kind of structure in place to check them. So I'm kind of seeing cross Owen Connemara's, and I don't know, like we actually had somebody doing equine therapy in Armagh and all over the place. Like I think we probably did about 12 schools of equine therapy, and I managed to find other counsellors who worked with horses across the province and get them into schools through Happy Healthy Minds, which got them paid work and their travel expenses and stuff paid. But they had to be a counsellor, which seems desperately unfair. I now have a girl who works for me who I put through the training, and she isn't a counsellor. She's on her level 2 and 3, but she um, does equine facilitated learning. She works so differently from me. And when clients come through, a lot of them are better suited to her, but I would not be able to use her in the school if Happy Healthy Minds came out with those rules again, because she is not on a BACP register. So there are all those kind of things that play into it and will play into the future of equine facilitated interactions and how we manage to secure funding and to pay for the job that we do, because it's not everybody
And I
private
guess,
that can afford it.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess one of the things that struck me that I didn't really realize around the register is that it does actually cover equine facilitated learning, equine facilitated therapy, psychotherapy, hippotherapy. All of those are covered under it. So it is kind of a come all, and then you are defined by your qualification as to how you're registered on it. So that's quite interesting, to see, because this area of equine assisted services is so vast. To try
Yeah.
and bring everyone together on one register is quite, it's a massive achievement. So I mean, it's based on your professional ethics and standards, your credibility, and your compliance and equine well-being, and your standards of education as well. Um, but just to talk a little bit, I guess, Cara, about that idea of a certificate of proficiency, which is what you were mentioning there, just sort of rewinding back a bit about people who maybe don't have the academic side of the qualification, that would be recognised under up to a level 4 degree.
Yep.
There is this idea of a certificate of proficiency, almost a grandfather rights equivalent, I guess.
Yep.
And that sort of looked at what by like a case by case basis under the
Looked on a
register.
case by case. I don't have all the devil in the detail, but it will be predominantly case study based. So although you may not have done the level 4 qualification, you've maybe been working for 4 or 5 years, you would write up case studies. So case studies of your client work to demonstrate sufficient understanding. And then you would commit to the same things that all of us commit to. So that's CPD, supervision, horse care, um, health and safety, your first aid, and all the other things that you have to commit to, which isn't a lot, and most of us should have anyway in place. It's just kind
Yeah,
of formalizing that.
yeah.
But yeah,
And
it's a
it's
case study basis.
yeah, and I think any kind of register that looks at the governance of your practice really is almost an opportunity for everybody. You know, it's not really a challenge that needs to be met as such. It's an opportunity for practitioners to demonstrate the transparency, I guess, of their practice, and also to understand where they may have gaps or where they may need to look to cover themselves to ensure that they are delivering safe practice. So just to explain a little bit to everybody, what is the PSA? Why would you want to be? Why did they want this register accredited by the PSA?
That is because predominantly the buyers of services, and certainly the big buyers of services, are not educated buyers. So the people who are assessing funding applications in the Department of Health or the Education Authority or the different health and social care trusts wouldn't be able to tell one end of a horse from another. Okay. They can't do their due diligence on the practitioners who are working in the programs that they fund. And so instead, there's a nationwide kind of stamp of approval, the kite of the PSA. And and so this accredited register gives that stamp. It's a stamp that, although these people in statutory organisations and funding bodies are not educated on equine facilitated or equine interactions, if you like, they do understand what the PSA stamp is. And so if we are on that accredited register as practitioners, the chances are that it's much more likely that they will fund us rather than somebody who is not on that register.
And it's also, you know, there's a lot of benefit, I guess, in speaking to people in language that they understand as well. So rather than approaching, you know, an organisation and trying to get work commissioned as an equine assisted services practitioner, whatever your, you know, your field is within that, you can approach them as a PSA accredited practitioner, which is a very different type of language and very different approach, and much easier for commissioning bodies to understand.
And even
Um,
the general public understand the kite mark. You know, we have
yeah,
kite marks underneath our sofas, on our ovens, on our irons, you know, like the kite mark is something that we understand and trust in the UK, and it's that kind of idea.
yeah, absolutely. Um, so looking at Northern Ireland as a region at the moment, obviously this is UK wide, but within Northern Ireland, I think there are, well, I know Pauline who's on the call there, Pauline Lusby, I think, are you there? Yeah. And Joanne Morton are on the register at the moment. And how do people go about accessing this or applying to it or even just finding out, you know, a little bit more about it, Cara?
Yeah, sure. So the application fee is £75. It's not overly expensive. And then the membership fee for being on the register is £125 per year. Application is by a form which you just print off and complete. Each four, so everybody kind of submits something different. Because I'm a counsellor, that's my kind of core foundation training. I had to provide evidence of my counselling qualification. So if you're an educational psychologist or a teacher, whatever, you have to provide evidence of that qualification, because that sits on the register alongside your equine facilitated work as well. It's very, very straightforward. We filled in the form, sent in copy of your insurance, first aid certificate, and then you sign a declaration, which is that you will work ethically, that you won't engage in relationships with clients that are unethical or unsafe, that you'll let them know if you've been convicted of any offences, that you'll keep up your CPD and your supervision. So it's really just a declaration you sign to say that, yeah, I will do that.
Yeah.
I know at the minute, I think there's like 23 on the register already who are predominantly Athena, but the current activity and the new applications coming through and queries are predominantly non-Athena, and I think there's quite a lot of activity at the minute. Athena as well, so if you trained with a non-Athena organisation, Athena kind of, what would you call it? Not match, but check off, right? Okay, it's level 4, it meets these criteria, and
Yeah.
then you are able to join. But they have just they've just created a relationship with one of the market leading kind of training organizations in the UK to accredit their internal training program, and that will be something they will continue to do. So that means anybody that trains through that training body, who we're not allowed to talk about yet, but it'll all come out in the next week or so. Anybody who trains with that's embargoed, anybody who trains with that training organization is automatically entitled to register on the Athena accredited register, which is a lovely move because as somebody that trained in Northern Ireland as a counsellor, I wasn't automatically able to join the BACP register for my profession. I had to do a certificate of proficiency,
Yeah,
to translate my course across. So it's really lovely if you do um, train then with a different organisation, you're automatically entitled to register, which is fab.
great. And you touched on that a little bit there with the CPD. This is a very lonely profession, I think we could say,
Yeah,
for most of the practitioners that we know. And you're taking on a lot, you're taking in a lot, and you've got so many layers to the practice. Whether you're working in therapy or learning or hypnotherapy, whatever aspect of it you're practicing in. And actually to have that, I think it's so up to 25 hours of CPD, that requirement per annum. It's actually, again, an opportunity for people to kind of create events, for the likes of ourselves, One Equine, to create events that are, CPD qualified, so that the practitioners can come together and learn from each other and start to kind of enhance these conversations, enhance
yeah.
practice, because yes, it's a requirement, but it is almost an opportunity for people to kind of come together and share their knowledge and see what everyone else is working on, which is quite
Yeah, 'cause your
exciting. So,
your practice can go quite stale. And
mhm,
I find like when I'm working with a client, if it's 4 to 6 weeks, that's okay. When it gets outside of that and it's longer term work, it can be really difficult.
yeah,
Um, and it can be really difficult because we're always looking for outcomes, although perhaps we shouldn't. But
mhm,
ultimately you want your client's situation to improve.
yeah,
Um, and I really do think it takes all the different types of interactions. I've really seen that with Hannah, who works for us. Um, and she's learning based and her work's absolutely epic. And there's clients come along, I'm like, they're not for me, they're for Hannah, and vice
yeah,
versa, if ones that come along. To give a flavour, like from we advertise, Hannah's seeing about 36 children and young people a week. She's now in 4 different schools. She's absolutely chock-a-block. She can't work any harder. There's
yeah,
not actually enough equine facilitated practitioners in North Down Nards and Belfast area to do the work that we have coming through the door. But as an organisation who can pay people to deliver that work and could look at spreading that across the province, they would need to be on the register because I would need to know as an employer that they are, um, they've completed that declaration to keep up with CPD and all that stuff.
yeah.
Because it's
And
even speaking with other practitioners and networking is such a rich experience.
it is. It's absolutely huge, and it's so important, because what fascinates me about a lot of this is people's backgrounds and where they've come from to where they are, and even just to take you, Cara, the experience you've garnered just on the finance side of things, but then also through UHub, and even the business experience and all of that. And you bring all that to your practice, and you can have done the same Athena qualifications as say Helen Sharp or whatever, but you will all practice in very different
Totally different.
ways, totally different ways, and yet it is imperative that there is that backbone of governance and safety, for both client, practitioner, and horse, running
Yeah.
through it. And that's where, sort of, I guess, where the register really is hugely helpful, because it does act as that, and then you can interpret your own practice the way you do, but that backbone is there. Um, is there a focus on kind of equine well-being? Is that one of the aspects that is
Yeah,
looked
that
at?
it's covered in, yeah, and that all is part of the application process in terms of, yeah, your horsemanship. Um, That's really important. And I think even in just what you're saying, if you lined all of us up and you watched everybody in this webinar practice, we would all do entirely different things. And that's what's really important about any therapeutic work, is that we are ourselves and we're allowed to be ourselves, that you get to be creative with that and you work in a way that's authentic to you. I don't pretend to be super duper with small children because I'm not. Hannah's super duper with small children, so she works with them all and she's happy to play. You know,
Mhm.
that's not how I work. And I think it's just lovely that there's such a diversity of practitioners and ways of using equines in a therapeutic and helpful way. But what is so important is that there is that backbone that you described it as of, okay, this is a safe practitioner that understands um, that they need to have CPD, they need to have some supervision, they must have insurance in place and all that important stuff,
Yeah,
and that they can be a safe practitioner while they're being creative and unique.
yeah. And the greatest one, the biggest assets, I guess, about this register is the independence of it, so that you can come at it from different avenues. It's been established by Athena, but you can your qualifications can be outside of that training. You can come at it from different training organizations, which is a real benefit as well. Just on that, do we have any questions from people on the webinar here? Because I'm sure it could be the first time some people are hearing about this, so
Hopefully
there's
not difficult ones.
well across well across it. Yeah, Aisling, are you okay to kind of monitor the questions there? Can you see them
Yeah,
okay?
that's fine. So Anne's got her hand up there. Anne, do you want to stick on your your mic or your camera and go ahead there?
Yeah, sorry, a wee bit of a delay there. Hello, everybody. Cara,
Hi.
it's interesting, what you're talking about this evening. Just a wee quick question. I'm registered with HETI and also the Early Equine Assisted Services Partnership, CIC. Would this be similar to these two people or two
Say
groups?
that again.
So I'm registered with HETI
Yeah.
and the Equine Assisted Services Partnership.
Yes.
So I pay a membership to both then each year, and there'll be quite a lot of filling out form work, like for example, showing proof of your insurance, your safeguarding, your training, and how you're updating your training on a yearly basis, and then that's looked at then each year before your membership's passed for the following year. So I'm just wondering,
Yeah.
is it similar to that?
Okay, it's similar in process and ethos, okay, in that they're checking your insurance and all those things, but ultimately that is not accredited by the PSA, so it will not be recognised by funders. It will not be recognised by statutory bodies. It's still a register. It might be worth being on. Like I could go on the Natural Wellbeing Directory for holistic services, for example, but that is not a PSA accredited register, and that's the difference. It is a directory as opposed to something with a PSA stamp that's going to be understood and recognised by funding bodies and employers, and actually really by the general public, who will not probably know what HEDI is, but they will understand what the PSA stamp is. Does that make sense? So HEDI perhaps could have had an accredited register, anybody could, but there's a lot of money and work that goes into actually going through that whole approval process. And I think Athena is the first animal intervention accredited register that exists in the UK. So there is no other. There is no alternative.
Okay.
In BACP, we've got in counselling, you've got BACP and NCPS, and they would be the only ones in the UK as well.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense? I'm not saying that they're not worth being on, by the way, Anne, at all, because it's still advertising. Some people will still use those to find practitioners,
Yes.
but it's just slightly different in terms of how it would be viewed by statutory funders, schools, public bodies, things like that.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's great. Thank you.
No bother.
Karen, maybe give a wee bit of background. I think there's 70 odd bodies represented or covered by the PSA. Is that correct? The different disciplines that are.
You were going to ask me a difficult question.
Well, somebody has to.
Yeah, you might be right, Richard. I don't know about the horsey one.
Well, to give a sense, I think there's lots of counselling and interventions. So people have
Yeah.
come at this from different angles and used the PSA as the one to run the rule over it and say,
Yeah.
right, it's of a standard. So it's worth looking to see what other disciplines and other organisations have chosen to be on the PSA.
Yeah.
You have to give people a flavour.
Do you want me to have a look?
If your IT skills are up to it, you work away there. But let's just shouldn't introduce these interludes.
I trust you to ask a different, yeah.
So actually,
Any
listen,
other
yeah.
questions
There are
while I
any other
Yes.
Google
questions
your
there?
difficult
Yes.
question?
Just actually, Pauline, while you're on the call there, it's lovely to virtually meet you. I haven't met you in person, but you are on the register as well. Have you had much kind of referral or uptake through the register so far, or?
I'm at the start of being on the register. So for me, it has been about getting to know your policies and everything in place. I would have had a lot of the stuff anyway through Pony Club Centre and stuff, and then doing my training through Athena.
Yeah.
So I would be at the start of the process, and it's kind of like what Cara said. It's about having best practice and preventing yourself from going stale. You know, was seen as the benefit for me. Also, through Athena, like no matter what training organization you go through, it's the support that you have then once the training has finished. So for me, through Athena, the support that you have with them, I have never had with any other training organization that I have been part of. And that practice can be lonely, but if you find that you have any issues with your practice, you have a community. So it's not the training organization, it's the people that have trained through Athena. You have a community there that you can communicate with, that you can get help through. So as I say, for me, the register is about best practice and then about keeping up with it's not supervision, what's it called? The hours, is it supervision hours that you have to do? Kind of like now. So to try and keep myself from going stale and to have the accreditation, and then ultimately so that you can go for funding then.
Yeah.
You know.
And this idea of sort of sustainable funding is becoming trickier and trickier to get. So you know, it's probably long term going to be coming from kind of government contracts. I guess there's more short term kind of private funding, but you know, government contracts are, I guess, the sort of the dream in terms, and departments, you know, Department of Health and Department of Education, that those kind of contracts that are longer term, I suppose they would all understand this kind of PSA kite mark and language and accreditation as well. You know, it makes it a little bit easier to start those conversations as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like at the minute, mine has just been through private funding. I haven't gone for any government funding or anything. And what you tend to find is that it can be one-off contracts, or it can be, I have a couple of organisations that are repeat business, and it'll be their third or fourth year that they would come out with me, but they all have one programme of 6 weeks. So then that's 2 or 3 organisations are doing that. How do you sustain the business long term then? Do you know that kind of way?
Absolutely, yeah. So, Cara, are you up to speed on all 70 organisations here? Are we good?
No, but I suppose all the big ones are on there. Like I skimmed through, there must be about 70. So BACP is a Professional Standards Authority register. So that would be my governing body, as is NCPS and Human Givens. So I don't know what field all you guys work in, but like Play Therapy UK is another one. So when we're employing a play therapist, that's what we look for, that they're a member of Play Therapy UK. We don't go, are you a member? You know, we don't look at the Professional Standards Authority. We just look because we know Play Therapy UK is accredited and it's safe because the PSA has rubber stamped it. So if they're a member of Play Therapy UK or BACP or NCPS, that's cool. They can work for us. And that's kind of how we look at it. There's everything on here, like loads and loads. Acupuncture. A lot of them are in the health and well-being sphere. So are there those high-risk organizations where you're working with people who perhaps could be vulnerable, and we've got a responsibility to understand our limitations and ensure we're practicing ethically. Yeah. Any more questions? Not
Richard,
from
do you
Richard. No more from Richard.
I was going to say, do you want to come in on that, Richard? Are you happy?
Well, I don't know. It's not a question, but it's just, I think if you look at down that list, it's very much oriented towards human health. The education piece people within the education field may not look to the PAC for approval initially. It's been the whole focus has been about human health and human well-being.
Mhm. Yeah, very much so. Any other
Alison,
questions?
have we any others?
No other questions in the chat at the minute.
Everybody's very quiet. Out of interest, am I allowed to ask, like, what? So you guys are all use equines or use horses in your practice, but do you have a core foundational training that other than the horses, like counselling or teacher? What are your different kind of backgrounds?
Hi, Cara. I'm an occupational therapist.
Hi.
Hi. I mean, I am using it a little bit in my work.
Yeah.
So I'm not really understanding PSA yet, but
No.
our occupational therapy professional accreditation, is that sufficient? And
Yeah.
in relation
So,
to what you're talking about?
yeah. So as an occupational therapist, you will be qualified and governed. Who is your governing body then?
It's HCPC.
So you're HCPC. So that's a wee bit like whenever we were doing Happy Healthy Minds, you would have been eligible to work on Happy Healthy Minds with horses because they recognize your HCPC, because that'll be professional standards authority approved. So it'll work that same way. So it's basically putting you on a register that's similar to what you are now, but that is for your equine practice.
So are you saying I really need to be on the PSA then? No,
On the Athena register. I think everybody should be on the Athena register. I think if you're an equine practitioner, if we want to raise the profile of equine therapies and make the general public realize its worth, its credibility, and its strength, there needs to be that kind of regulation in the field, and the lack of regulation up to now is what made me on the back foot about even doing the training in the first place, because I'm so used to belonging to a regulated field. So you're coming from a regulated field and will understand all that as kind of I do. So it's natural for me to kind of want to be on the equine register as I am on the ACP.
And are you saying that, your point earlier where you said that Athena would they recognize by its CPC?
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So they will want to see evidence of your equine qualifications, or that you're qualified by experience and could demonstrate that by case studies or whatever. But absolutely. So you would be kind of like I am. So I use horses, but I'm also a counsellor. So my practice will be different than yours because you're an OT who uses horses. And I met another OT that uses horses recently. It's like really, really cool. So it's just bringing something totally unique, and you work totally differently from me and will have a total different value for different clients. It's really, really epic. So the Athena Register will recognise your core training as an occupational therapist, as well as your integrating equines in that practice.
And I guess as well, I think, sort of correct me if I'm wrong in this, Cara, but I think of the 25 hours of CPD that's annually required, I think it's a max of 25 hours, but 5 hours of those minimum have to be within the equine side of things. So you could maintain your CPD as an OT, Evelyn, and not do any equine work at all, but you would maintain your OT level, and which would make you eligible to practice and and carry on, but to ensure that you are, I guess, getting the best ongoing CPD and knowledge and education within the equine side of things, it's good to have some sort of CPD requirement around an actual equine, whether it's welfare or whatever side of the equine piece you're looking at. It's quite I think important that is somewhere within your ongoing CPD, because like Cara and I have been riding horses for roughly the same amount of time, and certainly the way people tack has changed, turnout has changed, interaction has changed, groundwork has changed. It's very fluid that way. So I think that idea that, as in you must do at least 5 hours of equine CPD is important.
I see the point.
And I'll have to check with Graham too, because I'm sure things like this webinar will count towards your CPD as well.
Okay.
I'm sure they'll count towards your hours. I know I don't have to do pure CPD just on horses for those 25 hours, because I obviously do other types of CPD as well. But I think you're right. I think it's 5 you've got to do that are purely horse equine based.
Yeah.
But there's so much available online now as well. There's so much you can do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm also a member of there's an OT special interest group, equine, what's it called? Well, equine OTs, for want of a better way to describe it. So I link into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have anything else, Aisling? Is there anyone else wants to?
No more questions, but we've got Kate, just people talking about their backgrounds. We've got Kate, who has level 4 counselling and EFL diploma. We have Anne as a teacher.
Do you live near Belfast or Bangor? You need some work.
Anne's teacher. We've Lisa. Oh, Kate says yes.
Oh, guys, you can message me after, please.
Well, I think Aisling, you'll send around the recording to everyone. And if everyone's happy, and everyone's happy that their contacts are shared on that, the attendees' contacts. If you're all happy with that,
absolutely, because there's funding that we would apply for that's outside of the Bangor Belfast region if I thought there were practitioners could deliver it. And the thing about funded work, it's kind of usually a year or 2 years, so you kind of know you've got some steady work, which is really lovely. But yeah, so Kate's counselling and her level 4 diploma. What else are people doing, Aisling?
We've got teaching and therapy. We've got a teacher, social worker, as well as teacher in higher education, former foster care. Plenty. What else we got? Equine assisted learning facilitator, previously practitioner of traditional Chinese medicine and art director. Interesting.
Wow, how cool. So there's quite a lot of the people there that will be used to being part of a regulated body and all the things that come with it. And there's going to be some of us who, for them, it's completely new, the idea of this. It's helpful to get work, but it's actually not necessarily an advertising platform. It's about rubber stamping your practice.
Yeah.
Sure, there's advertising too, which is helpful, but a bit like I think Anne mentioned, there's other places you can advertise your services.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that cool. Everyone there, Aisling, is it?
No more questions.
No more questions.
No more questions. Brilliant. Well, we try and keep this to 45 minutes, so I'm very impressed. We've kind of nailed the 45 minutes there. Richard, is there anything you want to add at the end here?
Somebody's just asked a wee question there.
Yeah. What was it?
Sorry.
Is level 4 requirement to be an EFLF? Yeah.
What is
equine facilitated learning facilitator, I'm guessing.
Not a level 4 in counselling or anything like that, but a level 4 equivalent in an equine qualification to get on the accredited register or qualification by experience. So you don't have to have a level 4 counselling or anything, nothing like that. It just happens that that's my background. You don't have to have any other formal training, but you would have to have 4 diplomas in equine facilitated interactions or hippotherapy or any of the horse-based training to level 4. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, I think Brian has a question.
Hi. You need to
Can I go ahead there?
He's on mute.
I'm wondering if there's a debate like there was for Anne.
Hello.
You don't
Is
look
that
like
right?
Brian.
It's no, I don't look like Brian. I don't have a beard, thankfully. I'm
look
just
like Brian.
borrowing my other half's computer. I was the one that asked about the equine facilitated learning facilitator. I'm the one that said about the background in social work, and I am
Yeah.
so keen to move this forward in some sort of therapeutic way with particularly children who are care experienced
Yeah.
or traumatized. And I have that social work background and my foster background, but I've only recently started with the equine side of things in the last 4 years. So I've done level 2 and 3 certificate in equine, horse care and management with CAFRE. And I think my question is, I'm doing the coaching pathway with RDA at the minute. I've been working with them for 3 years as well. And I think my question is, everybody I talk to seems to think this level 4 diploma through Athena Herd is the way forward. And I'm not sure if it is, that's great. At least I'll know where to go. But I'm getting different views and I'm getting different pointers, and I don't know what direction to go in next.
You're always going to get different pointers, okay, and people with different experiences. I trained with Athena. I thought they were fab. I'm not saying they're the best because I only trained with Athena. I didn't train with anybody else. I can't compare and contrast. I was happy with my experience. However, I spent a lot of time and I did ring round and I chatted to people, and that was important to me. So I'm sure, like in here, who has everybody trained with? Like, we'll have all trained with different bodies. I think what's important is that you train with somebody that's you're gonna come out with a level 4 qualification that's gonna mean that you can accredit your work and you can become part of the accredited register. And then after that, all the different training will have their different strengths and their limitations. And Athena is an absolutely valid route, but this accredited register is Athena, but I have nothing to do with Athena. And actually the register is separate to it too. It was set up by them, but there's lots of other training places. And I'm sure if you did a wee head count or asked round, you could find different training providers, and then you could do a wee bit of research and come to the conclusion of what's the right training organization for you.
Right. So it's not necessarily the trainer, but you do need the level 4.
Yeah, you need the level 4 qualification. You need that, but you can do that in any number of places. I'm sure One Equine could put you in touch with or give you a list of all the different training providers that might be an option for you. And then you can choose, have a chat with them, lift the phone, see who you get a good vibe off, and go with the organization that sits best with you.
Yeah.
That's
great.
like, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank
Everybody
you.
will have
Thank you so
opinion on
much.
all of them. Do you know?
Also,
But if you
so I was just going to say on that too, I think some of the RDAs are doing sort of a partnership around the certificate and the diploma as well. So, have a chat within your RDA group. People might have come through the training already or have some experience of it. So you can touch base that way too.
Yep.
Thank you.
No problem.
Just have 2 minutes, just if you give people a sense, I'm conscious there's quite some people in Northern Ireland we've met who very significant human well-being qualifications, social workers, OTs, allied health professionals, teachers, SEN teachers. How do they go about getting a recognition of their equine experience? If it's only equine experience, if there's no experience of using the horse in the practice, but they're competent around horses, but how can that be demonstrated without an extra cost, extra qualification levels?
Okay, so they have to demonstrate that they have been integrating horses in their practice. So if you have maybe your BHS stage 2 and 3 and you've been riding horses for years and you're also a teacher, that's not actually enough. Because the skill is in the integrating the horses in the practice, so in the education piece. But if you've been integrating horses in your way of working, then it's on a case-by-case basis. So it would just be a matter of contacting Athena, and I can send into you guys kind of the general application process and a copy of the application form and stuff. But for those kind of who have grandfather rights, you would need to contact Athena directly, and that's not something that I do. And it would just be a matter of they would just be checking. And I think you have to write a case study. It's the idea you've got to write a case study and demonstrate how many years you've been working with horses.
All right, thanks.
Does that answer that question, Richard?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, there's obviously we feel there's certainly a role for CAFRE here. They've already embarked on this journey, and there's a role for CAFRE to maybe formalise this and put some more qualification levels around it. Because that would appear, certainly for people based here in Northern Ireland, that might still be the most cost-effective option.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And how well placed are they to do it with their setup? Like, it would be brilliant if they could offer that kind of level 4 qualification.
Yeah.
But I think the qualifications around the skill of integrating the horse in your current way of working, it's not a practice always in itself. So I'm not just an equine practitioner. I'm a counsellor who uses equines.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a bit of a melt. I appreciate.
We got, so is that Joanne there, Ashley? No, or is it Joan? Sorry, I can't see.
It's me.
No,
Joan.
it's not. It's Joanne.
Joan. It's
Right,
Joan.
Joan and Joanne Morton mix people up, but
I know the two Jane Mortons.
just sort of on the previous question, I mean, I spent quite a long time figuring out, you know, there's so many qualifications out there, and you don't want to waste time and money doing qualifications that don't get you where you want to go. So I had looked at several ones and ended up going to Athena before they were over here. So I went online and then went across to England, and then after that sort of asked would they come over here to Northern Ireland, because there was quite a few people had requested training. But for me, I had to ensure that your training, there's a lot of people call training, you know, certificates or diplomas, but for me, I needed to make sure that those were actually accredited and to a certain standard. And there were several courses, but that particular one sort of suited the best. And just, Cara, yeah, you kind of like, you know, I've teaching qualifications of RDA, qualifications of horse qualifications, but I really had to do the EFL qualification, which is, you know, very specific to put in along with it. And then the register came out after that, and yes, I am on the register now, but I had, for me, coming from a different background, you know, Cara be very fair with all the paperwork and whatnot, but you know, to get policies and procedures in place and make sure that they were adequate. When I went in the register, I had to submit those. So if they needed sort of changed, or if they needed additional stuff, they'll come back and tell you, you know, what,
and help you out with it.
Yeah, they'll help you out and tell you what additional information you need. And it's a bit like the, you know, like the freelance coaching with your insurance, or to stay on HSI registers or whatever. You know, you have to keep things up to date. You have to have your CPD, you have to have your child protection, you have to have your access NI. But that's a good thing, because it's keeping you right, and you know when you go out that you have in place what you should. So to a certain extent, they are keeping you right and they will help you. So that's, for me, that's the advantage of the register for me personally.
Yeah, that's 100%, because if you had a disgruntled client or disgruntled client's parent and they decided to make a complaint against you, or something happened, you've got safety in that. And although we all have insurance, or I hope we all have insurance, you still have to have taken the necessary steps to make sure that you're, you know, if you know you're practicing safely. Otherwise, your insurance isn't going to cover you. You know,
your insurance actually isn't valid unless you have a lot of those things in place. So
in place anyway. Yeah,
it is a help. Now, obviously, because I'm coming from a teaching background, you know, I wouldn't be on the other registers, you know, that you would be on, Cara. So it's very useful for me to be on a register. As far as the qualifications are concerned, you know, I had a couple of friends who had done diplomas, but they weren't at level 4. You know, they hadn't the number of hours, they hadn't the content, and then so they weren't actually accredited. So just whatever qualification you choose to do, you need to make sure that, you know, it is accredited and is what you want and need. And yeah, it just takes a wee bit of time to look into that. There are various ones out there, and maybe your work pattern, certain ones, you know, will suit you, certain ones won't, and you know, the approaches are all different. Certainly Athena's EFL, it's very much, you know, the theory and practice. They're not saying go out and do this or do that, or they're not putting things in wee boxes. You know, it's all about you applying you know, all the knowledge that you have.
Yeah.
Thanks, Joanne. Do we have anybody else, Aisling? Is there any other? We got Aisling there.
Sorry, coughing fit. There's a question here about, again from Not Brian, can the practice element of the level 4 training be assessed with RDA? So that might be either for Cara or Joan, depending. I'm not sure. Joan, you went through RDA and then Athena, wasn't that?
You need to do level 4 diploma standalone qualification with an equine interacted practitioner training organisation like Athena or any of Athena's competitors at a level 4. But I don't know anything about the RDA. I don't know.
Your RDA qualifications are separate, but if your case studies were coming through RDA, I mean, you'll have a certain number of case studies to have written up and to have done over a number of weeks. So, I mean, where your case study clients come from is up to yourself, you know. So if they came through RDA, that's fine. There's no problem with that. But it's not an RDA qualification. Like my RDA qualifications are separate to my AFL qualifications. Now, they're all helpful and all work into each other, but you certainly could take your case studies from wherever you choose for your level 2 and level 4.
And I think the RDA did see, you know, a growing kind of area within EFL and the RDA, and I think they have commissioned Athena to put some RDA coaches through the certificate, and I think 1 or 2 through the diploma as well. So that, you know, it might be worth looking into that as well to see if there's another cohort going through from RDA. Certainly we can, there's Julie Fraser on the One Equine board. She's well across all of that, so we can put you in touch with her as well if needs be, if you would like. It's no problem.
My cat's being demanding. It's just arrived in, like it owns the place.
Brilliant. Well, are we anything else, Aisling, or are we nearly?
No, I think that's the last of it then.
Great.
Wait, just like, Mom, you're back. I've been hunting.
Yeah.
I need love.
Brilliant. Well, look, Cara, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much. I hope that was helpful.
Really useful, yeah. No, it was great. Thank you. And thank you to everybody who's taking the time to come this evening. And then, as we said, Aisling will fire the recording round to everyone, and it'll have contact details on there. So anybody you want to catch up with or network with, please do. On the One Equine Trust website, we do still have the practitioners forum there, and we will be running, you know, further CPD events, and the webinars will be going every month. And, you know, we always want to hear from you, good, bad or indifferent. Let us know, and we'll do our best to connect the right people to do what you need. So please give us a shout. Aisling is full time with us now, so there is somebody there.
Fire away.
Yeah, fire away. There's nothing else to do at all. Yeah, but look, thank you all very much, and great to see you. And yeah, thanks again, Cara.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.